Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. I don't have a lot of EVE news from last week, but we should look forward to EVE Down Under next weekend, where hopefully CCP will give us some more information, perhaps a few surprises for the next expansion. And of course the expansion is coming late May, so if you want to keep an eye on the development there, of course, try to go to CC. It is what I'm trying to do, such as taking a look at the new Tech 2 Triglavian ship. Next to that we have the 16 years of EVE, so I hope everyone grabbed their 16 gifts, 1 million skill points for the Omega clones. That's a pretty nice gift. And of course, during this period, CCP is holding this, or was holding these special sales. Right now it's still the Tengu Ultra Jungle skin that's going for 16 plex. So if you wanted some really cheap some really cheap skins, then you should have kept an eye on the new Eden store. Next to that we have the new Emperor Bear skins, of course, that are still front and center. Then we have some bundles, and that's really it. So you do have one skin that I'm not sure how long that's going to continue, but that is for sale for 16 plex from time to time, so it might be pretty interesting. So next up, let's just move on to the market itself. We'll start with plex and stuff at 135. Here we go. I am personally a little bit curious as to what plex are doing, and you can see that in Jita for 4 plex are down a little bit. First sell order coming in at a little bit above 4.4 million ISK. If we take a look at the chart, you can see the hesitation in the market. Basically, in the last couple of days, we've actually been going back up, but we've also gone down to an average of 4.3 million on the chart as well. So this is obviously hesitation from the market to go even higher, and I have to be honest, I personally think that we will start to see the first effects of the summer time in EVE Online. It's something that comes back every year during the summer. Activity drops a little bit, people have other things to do, and so I'm really curious to see how the expansion is going to do, what the new content is like, and how long it is going to be able to keep hype and interest in the game, because, well, the seasonal drop-off is just a reality in a game like EVE Online. And I think the market is starting to hesitate about going higher at this point, because, well, they know that this is coming as well. If we take a look outside of Jita in the player-owned trade hubs, we go down to 4.4 million, just above that for the sellers, and the buyers are at just below 4.4 million. So there's definitely a very narrow margin here between buyers and sellers right now, which, well, we could go either way from this point. My personal expectation, but this is of course just a gamble on my part, is that we will start to go down a little bit, perhaps after the expansion or something like that. For the multiple pilot train certificates, you can see that we're also plateauing out just above 2 billion ISK, a little bit above that for the sellers and just below that for the buyers. Again, really narrow margin between buyers and sellers, so the market is basically, I think, a little bit in a wait and see pattern. We might not know everything the expansion has to offer. We don't really know too much about the future roadmap from a CCP when it comes to EVE Online, so there's probably this little bit of let's just wait and see for the expansion to actually drop. Let's see if they have more announcements on, for instance, a 64-bit client, which might actually drum up some interest in the game. But for right now, it's really hard to say exactly where things are heading for the game outside of the expansion itself, of course. Then we have the skill extractors that are mirroring plex very closely, of course, and you can see that little dip here about a week ago where we went down to around 490 million ISK. So sellers are just above that, 492, and the buyers are at 491. Again, super narrow margin, about 1 million ISK between sellers and buyer for something that's almost half a billion ISK. That is a very narrow margin. So again, that holding pattern for the market is really showing up here. What are the injectors doing? Oh, first sign of a bit of a decline here in the price. We went above 1 billion ISK for the large scale injectors. We're now selling for 1 billion and 1 million ISK, but the buyers are down to 970 million ISK. So here we do have a 30 million which is 15 times bigger than the skill extractor margin here, and we see a little bit of a decline here at the tail end in the large scale injectors, of course at a 1-year high point. So still an incredible time to sell. Of course, $1 billion ISK for a large scale injector is a crazy good price. For the small scale injectors, well, we have a bit of a faster decline after a peak to 210 million ISK. You can see that pressure is on 5-day moving average down below the 20-day moving average, and we're slowing down, but we did go back to 203 million ISK for the sellers, 182 for the buyers. Again, an even larger margin percentage wise than the large scale injectors, if I'm not mistaken. And so that is, in my opinion, quite significant that we do see this peak forming in these skill injector markets. I think it's another telltale sign that the market is hesitating, and that I think the most likely scenario is that the summer decrease in activity is actually going to lower the pressure on the price a little bit. Then we have the daily alpha injectors that are also declining all of a sudden. That is actually decently significant. Went to a 1-year high point, let's call it 76 million ISK, maybe even a day with 80 million ISK, but now we are down to 68 million for the sellers and 60 million for the buyers. So that's an 8 million, that's more than 10% of a margin here. That is quite a surprise. You would expect this to be a little bit closer because a very large portion of the injector price is of course plex itself, which are the skill extractors. Super narrow margin in these goods, training certificate, plex and the extractors, but the injectors actually have growing margins, with I think the buyers lowering their prices. Next up, let's move on to the minerals at 640. And I have like a little bit of a starting cold or something like that, so if my voice is a little bit weird, that is why. But let's keep going. Here is titanium. Ooh, that hurts. You can see on the chart that we're breaking 4.5 ISK, so the pressure is on. Unfortunately, we're heading towards that 1-year low point if this has any momentum. And in Jita we are now selling for, well, 459. We had a couple of sellers at 455 when I was making the ticker, so at least some people are buying. But look at 459 and 460, we're talking several billion units again, so the volumes are still there. The buyers are down to 446, and apparently, judging from the average price, they are actually grabbing titanium as well from impatient sellers. For pyrite next, after a decline back down to 3.5 ISK, we actually try to get back to 3.8 to 4 ISK. So sellers are at 393, buyers at 371. That is a very good sign, actually, I would say. With pyrite, one of the most overproduced minerals in the game at the moment, I would say, with this crazy low price, actually crawling back and trying to get back towards that 4 ISK. At least it's not a 1-year low point, which was close to 3 ISK in mid-December. After that we have a Mexalon. Ooh, and that is actually a sharp drop off. Are we below 55 ISK? That would be a 1-year low point. That's the bad news. So it's 57 for the sellers and 56 for the buyers, very close to the 55 ISK, which would be a 1-year low point. So a very sharp sudden drop off in Mexalon due to increased volumes. You can clearly see that around 1.5 billion units came in all of a sudden, 2 to 3 times the normal daily average, which has crashed the price down. So here probably have some impatient sellers starting to sell to those sell orders. To those buy orders, excuse me, and then the other sellers just had to keep competing with each other, driving the price down from 60 to now 57 ISK in record time. That's a sharp drop off and not what I was expecting. This is supposed to be the nullsec bottleneck. We have a little bit of rumbling in nullsec with the Imperium threatening, I think, like a region of space from Pandemic Horde. Might have started fireworks, but then, you know, they are evacuating apparently, so it's not gonna happen. And war in nullsec would be great for Mexalon, but right now it really looks like we're not doing too great. After that, we've got Isogen breaking through the 15 ISK barrier, so even more pressure in the mineral market. 1586 for the sellers, 1493 for the buyers. So the buyers are below 15 ISK for Isogen. And again, looking at the chart, impatient people tend to win out here, just saying, you know what, this this less than 1 ISK margin. I want to get rid of this right now. Let's just sell straight to these buyers. So another one that's actually pointing towards even more pressure in the mineral market. I would say that pyrite is really starting to look like the outlier that is trying to defend the price range. Most of the others are not succeeding. Noxium, we saw that last week, broke through the 300 barrier and is now trading in 275 to 300 price range. 299 for the sellers, 288 for the buyers of Mexon. Volumes wise, this is not that much, but of course for most of the year we've been able to comfortably sell above 300 ISK. Now all of a sudden you can't do that anymore, so it's understandable that people are a bit more hesitant. After that, we have Zydrine, that's surprisingly holding on to 500 ISK at the moment. Why is this surprising? Well, if you look at the ticker, Megasite is actually down another almost 5%. So this one is holding on, 501 for the sellers, 477 for the buyers. Really pretty impressive actually to see 1, 2, 3, 4 months plus of decently stable Zydrine prices at 500 ISK. It's not a great price, but considering the general pressure in the minerals and of course the availability of Zydrine in HiSig at the moment, I personally feel like this is actually a pretty good performance. Compare that to Megasite, which is continuing a steady decline in the last 2 months, or 1.5 months I should say, and has broken to the 450 barrier. 437 for the sellers, 412 for the buyers. Well, you know what you should focus on when you're looking for moons to mine. It is obviously Zydrine over Megasite, which is the reverse of the normal situation, because you normally get less Megasite for ore than you get Zydrine. It should be more plentiful and it should be cheaper, but it's not the case right now. After that, we have Morphite that declined again and played with the 7,000 ISK mark. A little bit of volume, so some investors are coming back and the sellers have pushed the price above 8,000 ISK. Buyers are up to 7,700. So basically about a week ago or early this week, you had a nice opportunity to grab some very cheap Morphite, but investors came in, volumes are up and prices are still low, but definitely not at a 1-year low point anymore. After that, we are moving on to PI coming in at 12.10. And let's go over these. So the broadcast nodes, advanced PI material, usually tied to structures. It'll have other uses as well. But right now you can see still trading below average. And I think what I said when I was talking about the plex, taking a breather, being in a holding pattern, I think it's the same thing here. We don't have any concrete news from CCP about future structure development, and so the market is very hesitant to come in and speculate on these advanced PI materials. And as a result, this does potentially create opportunities, but I personally feel like having patience is the best way to go and really waiting for those 1-year lows. So let's say buyers well below 1.9 million before you jump in. And here we have almost 2 million for the sellers, but 1,955 for the buyers. So it's trading below average. It's definitely super affordable to grab your advanced PI materials for structures that you want to make right now. But for the speculation, for the investments, I would personally be more careful and wait for a clear decline. Like here, when we hit 1.9 as the average price, obviously you could have bought below 1.9 million. Between these orders basically, and that's where you, I think, make good investments for, well, it's a bit of speculation, but for when CCP announces more structure stuff. Construction blocks, that is a super sharp decline. I was actually really happy when construction blocks over the course of the first half of the year managed to claw its way back to 12,000 ISK to an average price, a pretty good price, and this now has all fallen apart in the month of May here. Basically, it said, nope, that's enough of that, and we're down to less than 10,000 ISK all of a sudden. Yeah, 10,200 for the sellers, 9,000 ISK for the buyers. If we try to look at 9,000 ISK on the chart, this is below absolutely everything. I would say that this might be overdoing it a little bit. Potentially, I would try to put up a buy order for construction blocks, try to grab it as close to 9,000 disc as possible. Look at the historical perspective, as at the latest 1 year perspective. I think 30% or something like that should be easy to make if you have the patience for that. So construction blocks, super sharp drop off. Buyers are at 9,000 disc. That is super cheap, 1 year low basically. Consumer electronics had the same pattern. I felt like it did really well to get back to 13 and then 14,000 disc in the first half of the year, but then that sharp drop off as well to 12,000 disc. But this one is doing a little bit better, 12,400 for the sellers, 11,600 for the buyers. A bit below average, but at least it's not falling off a cliff. For the fuel related materials, here is the first one, coolants, back to 11,250, basically back on its average, 12,000 for the sellers, 10,500 for the buyers. You are noticing a pretty healthy margin between these two. The average price is back on the yearly average, you would say, with a nice little bubble here in March, of course, which despite this has not led to expensive fuel prices. That's actually what's surprising me the most about all of this. So now we are back on the average for coolants at least. Enriched uranium is also tied to fuels, and you can see that we are getting into that pattern here as well. Nice March peak up to 16,000 disc. Now we're back down to 13,000 on the average, 13,500 for the sellers. Buyers are coming in at 12,700. Get rid of one buy order, and we might see a sharp drop off and a potential buy opportunity, of course, showing a little bit of a lack of demand, basically being the cause of the decline in price here, but still holding on quite nicely to basically an average price. Integrity response drones, here not sure, was this like some sort of speculation on the Triglavian structure ship, whatever it is, mothership that's been uncovered slowly by the players as part of the storyline? I personally think that's what was happening, but now we can see that we're back towards that 2.2 million range on the averages, well below average. And so less than 2.4 million for the buyers, 2.2 for the sellers. I'd be a bit more patient before putting up a buy order. If this has any more momentum, that would be great. Buy as close to 2 million as possible. But you can clearly tell again that these are trading well below average. Mechanical parts, all right, fuel related and actually climbing to 13k, back to 1 year high point. 13,100 is for the sellers, 12,100 for the buyers. So a bit of an outlier here. Mechanical parts actually going up in price to a really nice range right now. For something that's this easy to produce from barren planets, that's quite good. Nuclear reactors actually also falling off a cliff here all of a sudden, heading back for 80k on the average. Well, all right, it's because impatient sellers are just selling to these buy orders. 101 still for the sellers and 83,000 is for the buyers. Organic mortar applicators, that's what I'm talking about. Advanced PI material, you can clearly tell that we've from time to time been trading close to 1 million ISK, which is well below average, which is what we've seen integrity response drones and broadcast nodes be at, but here is that drop off average price well below a million ISK, 1 million for the sellers, but 970 for the buyers, and some of them at 945. You can buy integrity response drones for a decent chunk below 1 million ISK. That is your opportunity, I think, to try and invest for the longer term for hopefully an announcement from CCP that'll turn this around. But these are the opportunities I think that you want to try to time. It's probably already a little bit too late. This 940, buyers are already up to 970. But this is really the pattern that you want to look for if you're looking to invest in these advanced PI materials. Robotics back on the climb, heading for 110,000. All right, 104 for the sellers, 98,000 for the buyers. Basically trading above average, and this is less volatile than it looks. This is 100,000 ISK, 110 at the very peak, and then the lows at 95 or even 90,000 ISK here. That's actually a pretty narrow range for what we're seeing on this chart, but fuel related and back above its average. Self-harmonizing power cores. All right, bit of a drop off as well. How close to 1.9 million are the buyers? They're at 1.9 and the sellers are below 2 million ISK. So again, advanced PI trading well below average. If this has any more momentum and you can grab them below 1.9 million, I think you have a good investment. Superconductors were also dropping a little bit towards 11,000 disk, but coming back. All right, 13,500 for the sellers, 12,000 for the buyers, and back to, well, an above average price for the sellers for sure. Test cultures continuing to languish at a very low price range, 6 to 7,000 disk. If you look at this 1 year chart, that's actually kind of terrible. 6,600 for the first seller. Most are at around 7,000 disk, and buyers are at 6,000 disk. That is super cheap, complete lack of interest in test cultures, and something that you could slowly buy a little bit of at the best prices, I think. And finally, yeah, my my throat is super dry, so let's try to keep going. Wetware mainframes also obviously below average, playing with the 2.1 million range. Where are those buyers at? 2 million round. So this again is also super cheap, well below average, and you're buying for 2 million below the entire chart. Some potential for wetware mainframe investments as well, I think. I'm quickly going to drink a little bit, and then we'll move to advanced MOO materials. There we go. So these are coming in at 2040. And let's take a look at them. So crystalline carbonites, 1 year low. That was, I think, last week that this was starting to materialize. You can see that this happened on a massive volume increase, so quite a bit of dumping from 150 down to, well, let's say 129. Yep, okay. Now we are selling for 140, and buyers are up to 138 as well. It's actually 139 to 138. So basically, this massive dip is already over. We are climbing back to the 140 range, but this is still, of course, very, very low for crystalline carbonites. Ferrite carbides, also slow decline to 1 year low point, breaking through the 125 barrier, 122 for the sellers, 120 for the buyers. It does feel risky if you look at this 1 year chart, but this is really at a 1 year low point, and potentially you could put up a nice buy order, I think. Then we have titanium carbide that's actually holding on to the 170 to 180 range despite a massive volume spike as well. Yesterday, 195 for the sellers, 180 for the buyers. 180 for the buyers, yep, that's around here. 195 is going to be around here. So actually on a slow uptrend as well. I think this must have been a pretty big buy here with this increased volume, because that one is 195, very close to 200. It's actually starting to trade maybe even a touch above average for the sellers. Interesting contradiction between crystalline carbonite and ferrite carbide at 1 year lows, and then titanium carbide actually holding on quite nicely and actually having a buyout on the volume increase here, bringing the sell price to almost 200 ISK. Tungsten carbide is trying to hold on, but is obviously trading below its yearly average here, selling for 199, buyers at 191. It's still better than crystalline and ferrite carbide. After that, we have the metamaterials. Photonics are, well, at 1 year low points and basically staying there for now. Selling for 16,000, buyers are at a little bit above 15,000. That is obviously quite cheap. Plasmonic metamaterials are actually on an average price then. Another strange juxtaposition that these are not moving in tandem that well. 21,000 for the sellers, 18,400 for the buyers. Definitely your focus, I think, if you're producing stuff like this. Then we have the non-linear metamaterials that are shooting up. Okay, what the hell is happening here? 25,000 as a starting point, and now selling for 29,000 disk. Not that many people are selling this stuff. Nope, not even in the player-owned trade hubs. So this is really JITA only, and the bars are forced up to 28,000 ISK all of a sudden. Very interesting. Terahertz metamaterials also shooting up. This might be Gnostic politics. I'm not exactly sure, but also shooting up here. A starting point of 22,500 ISK. Now 26,000 for the sellers, 25,000 for the buyers. For people that did invest in some of these metamaterials, especially the terahertz one and the nonlinear one, you've got small sell opportunities. I think if you bought at the right time, you're probably already looking at a decent profit. What a strange situation in these standard faction tied advanced boom materials. We've got some carbonites that are dropping off a cliff, and then we get some metamaterials that are actually shooting up and going well above average. This is like two different activities that I really don't understand. If you get any information on what's happening, I would suspect Gnostic politics have something to do with that. Feel free to put that down in the comments. For the other advanced boom materials, we get fermionic condensate flat at a very low point of less than 90,000 ISK. So that's super cheap right now, but apparently not going anywhere. Volumes are quite low. So this is, I'm not sure if I'd call it a buy opportunity, just because of how depressed most of the market is. Ferrogel also trading well below average. Buyers are at 43,000 ISK, so that is actually pretty cheap as well. Fullerite, same picture here, went down to less than 900 ISK, now selling for 938. Buyers are still at 854 though, so that's just a margin opening up. The buyers are not budging. They're saying we want that super cheap Fullerite before we grab it. Hypersynaptic fibers also obviously trading well below average, not necessarily a low point. That was 11,000 ISK, we're a bit above that for the buyers, but obviously not trading that well. Transistors, also again well below average. Then we've got phenolic composites. Second dip down to a 1 year low point again. Sellers are down to 1650, buyers are at 1600 ISK. That is super cheap if you look at this chart. 1 year low point yet again. And then we've got ceramic fibers. That's also coming back to that low point of November of less than 400 ISK. 386 for the buyers, 389 for the sellers. That is quite a depressed market, but as I said, keep an eye on these metamaterials. What the hell is happening there? Very interesting in a generally quite depressed market. There are two outliers that are actually shooting up quite violently. Interesting. Perhaps we should look at the right investments here, because at some point this might all turn around. And could these be the first signs that that might be happening? Well, always a bit of a gamble, of course. Next up, we have the Tech 2 ships coming in at 27 minutes. Let's go. Here is the Aries. All right, very sharp drop off, 1 year low point. Sellers are down to less than 24 million ISK and buyers are down to 20 million ISK. Super cheap Aries right now. Definitely, I think, worth a pickup because, well, it is an interceptor. If I'm not mistaken, it is still immune to interdiction spheres, warp disruption field generators, etc. So this is just, as a travel scepter, this is quite useful. And if you want one, or if you want a couple just in reserve, then you're grabbing them for 20 million ISK, 1 year low point, super cheap. The Basilisk is back above 230 million ISK, 231 for the sellers and 212 for the buyers, which is kind of cheap. We're definitely trading below average, but we have seen Basilisks go for less than 200 million as well, so I'd be a bit more careful there. The Cerberus, nice little wavy pattern with a low point of 220 and a high point of 270. 244 for the sellers, 210 for the buyers. Again, buyers really low, but the average price is still actually holding on quite nicely. Cruiser hull. Here's the Crow though, interceptor hull. Also dropping off 25 million on the chart, 26 for the sellers, 22 million for the buyers. Also very cheap, 1 year low point in another frigate hull. So the cruiser hulls, a bit more hesitant, although the Guardian is also going down to 200 million ISK on its average. 210 for the sellers, 190 for the buyers. Try to get 190 to show up on the chart, and you can see that we are trading below everything. So yeah, I would personally, I think I'm gonna fly over and try to put up a Guardian buy order, because this is an opportunity. And Guardians, logistics cruisers, I mean, they're the backbone of lots of Gnostic bigger engagements. They get primaried a lot as well. I think this one makes sense to try. even more than something like these interceptors, which I don't think are really in the meta that much anymore. Although, you know, interdiction immunity is still super powerful. So, all right, some opportunities for sure. The Heretic is also declining a bit, staying below average, but trying to hold on to 70 million, looks like. 71 million for the sellers, 61 million for the buyers. You can see this big margin between sellers and buyers. It's not going to be easy, looking at these average prices, to grab some of these buy orders. So maybe you may have to be a little bit more aggressive. Let's say the Guardian, right? You're probably not going to grab it for 190, but try a 195, which is still really below the entire chart. I think you've got a chance to do that, but it's gonna be there's gonna be enough competition there to make that tricky. But there's this big margin between sellers and buyers, and then when you see the sellers drop off to a low point, that's, I think, your time to strike. For the Hounds, and yeah, again with a sudden double click, I think I'm gonna have to buy a new mouse. That's interesting. Bit different. Volume increase, prices up to 30 million ISK as we drop to 26 million as the bottom. 30.5 million for the sellers, 26 million for the buyers. So again, this time it's a reverse situation. Someone came in, bought lots of hounds at cheap prices, and increased the sell prices to 30 million ISK, but the buyers, they're not budging. They're staying at 26 million. They want those cheap Take 2 ships right now. After that, and god damn it, why are you doing that? Here is the Ishtar continuing the slow decline and still at a 1 year low point, an even lower 1 year low point. 207.5 million for the sellers, 192 for the buyers. It's a slow burn, but you can see that we are yet again at a low point, and 192 for the buyers is definitely below the entire chart. So just like with the Guardian, it's not going to be easy to grab an Ishtar from the buy order, but if you do, you probably have a great purchase. Manticore also declining to a 1 year low point, heading for 29 million for the sellers and 27 million for the buyers. Looking at this chart, it's also an opportunity, but it's starting to make for a lot of buys if you if you want to take advantage of all of these 1 year low points. The Munin, for instance, is still hovering at that range as well. Buyers at 205. I'd love to see them closer to 200, to be honest. Here is the Nemesis holding on to a price above 25 million, but the buyers at 25. Okay, so that's another no for me. I think we can do better than that on the decline. Oneros held on to above 200 million for quite a bit on the average price. That is now finally breaking. 180 for the sellers, 150 for the buyers. All right, 150 million. Look at that on the chart. Again, volumes are terrible. It's not gonna be easy, but if you manage to grab an Orneros here for 150 or close to that, and then you wait for something to happen in nullsec, of course you will have to be patient for that, but if it does happen and we're talking 250 million for the sellers, I mean, that's a trade that that might be worth a little bit of patience. The Purifier also dropping off, and not yet at a 1 year high low point, but we're talking 29 million for the sellers and 26 million for the buyers. You can see that there's not that many buyers, so again, healthy margin between these two. Interesting. Saber next went to a low point last week, 10 days ago, something like that, less than 65 million. It's 65.6 for the sellers, 62 million for the buyers. That's also really cheap, actually, if we look at this 1 year chart. Then we get the Scimitar, also not holding on anymore, breaking through the 200 million barrier on average, 213 for the sellers. They're still trying, but look at that margin then, 179 for the buyers. That's a 32 million difference between buyers and sellers. Said it many times already, but for this week it seems to generally be true. We have this margin opening up, we have this lack of demand. It's not going to be easy, but if you manage to grab a Scimitar for less than 180 and then you look at 180 on the chart, you have an incredible opportunity, I think, to make a nice profit. Now we have the Stiletto, which last week dropped off to an average of 26 million. Came back a little bit, 28 now for the sellers, but it's still 25.5 for the buyers. So the Take 2 ships, quite a few of them dropping off with lower sell orders, and even when that happens, you have this really big margin between sellers and buyers, creating nice opportunities, I think. Let's move on to the Tech Tree ships at 34.15. And we will start with the destroyers. Here is the Confessor. Also, yeah, a bit of a decline again this week. We saw last week, I think, that there were a bit too many ships coming in, but the rest of the categories seem to be doing okay. But the Confessor was obviously under pressure a bit from increased volumes. We're down to 37.5 million on the chart. It's 38 for the sellers, 34.4 for the buyers. And that was 54, 38, 12, 10, another 23 here. Feels like we've got a little bit too many of those 10, 20 plus sell orders compared to what we had, let's say, a month ago. But what I am seeing here is that in the last 24 hours, it's not that much anymore. So I think that we still have this healthy situation. Price went up to 42.5 million for the Confessor, so we get increased production. People bring a little bit more of that to the market. We drop down below 40 million, and you can see that obviously the supply is slowing down and looking for better opportunities. Next up, we've got the Hecate, for instance, which went up to 45 million ISK on the chart, 45 million for the sellers, 41 million for the buyers. And here you can see exactly what I'm talking about, a full front page of new ships, 25, 35, 24. This is actually less than what we saw last week in the Confessors coming in, but it's normal that you have all of these ships coming in because you can sell these destroyers for 45 million ISK and the Confessor only 38 million. Which one would you prefer? Obviously, you'd rather bring a Hecate than a Confessor to the market. And so this is healthy. I think that the Confessor, with a bit of time, will make its way back towards 40 million ISK, and the Hecate, with all of that fresh supply, is bound to come under pressure a bit and head towards that 40 million again. Then we've got the Jackdaw, which went down to 40 million and actually jumps up a little bit. We're talking 41.7 million for the sellers, 39 million for the buyers, so still healthily above 40 million ISK. And you can see this is actually a little bit dangerous, 60, 60, 40, 40. That is a lot of supply, more than a full front page coming in the last 24 hours. So obviously the Jackdaw, this little jump up will not last very long. It's a bit too much supply for that. That's something to keep in mind here. In the last couple of months, we had this maybe 3-4 orders of this magnitude, and the rest was below 10, and the prices could easily, maybe even slowly rise or maintain their range of 40 million and up. Look at the Confessor chart here, very nice, holding on to 40 million ISK for most of the time. But now, yeah, supplies are obviously up a little bit, and it is potentially putting a little bit too much pressure on the price. So we'll have to be careful. We've got this Vapel here as well, holding on to just below 40 million ISK, 39.5 for the seller, so still more expensive than the Confessor, which is kind of crazy for the least popular one, 36 million for the buyers. But look at 50, 51. This was what we would expect to see on a normal week, let's say 2 months ago or a month ago or something like that. So all right, last week it was really only the Confessor that was showing too much supply, but this week, Jackdaw, that's a lot, 204 or 4 sell orders. Hecate, that's quite a bit in the last 24 hours. On the other hand, the Hecate is going at quite a premium compared to all the others, but generally speaking, I am seeing more destroyers coming to the market, which might put some pressure on the prices. So I'm not even sure that 40 million is going to be defendable for long if these kinds of supplies keep coming in. Then we have the cruisers. Here is the Legion dropping off to 1-year low points. All right, 142 million for the sellers, 133 for the buyers. And then this to me is a massive surprise. I'm not seeing the supply. I'm not seeing the big reason, except for impatient sellers that are driving this price down, why this is. So I would honestly say, yeah, try to buy a Legion for 135 million ISK. You're buying below the entire chart. Look at your potential. I'm liking this even more than Tech 2 ships. Why? Because of this, we're not seeing that massive supply here. So this is a surprise. The Legion dropping off on, well, average volumes, nothing too crazy. 1-year low point. I'm calling this right now the best opportunity of this Eve talk. Next up, we've got the Loki. same thing, dropping off to a 1-year low point, but let's take a look at supply here. That's a bit more, but it's still nothing crazy. 18, 22, 24 coming in at 155.5 million. Buyers are at 145, so less than 150 for a Loki. That is quite substantial. And I mean, this is a decent amount, but this is nothing crazy. This is not oversupplied or anything like that. So this feels like a crazy drop off in the Loki and the Legion as well. Then we get the Proteus, same thing, price going down. Let's see how close to 130 the buyers are. 131 million for the buyers, 137 for the sellers, and then to my surprise, 24, 26. The rest, this is 4 days old, this is 3 days old. This is not a drop-off amount of Protei or a 1-year low point amount of cruisers. And now we've got the Tengu next, that's holding on to 152, so that's not a 1-year low point yet. 152 for the sellers, 144 for the buyers, and outside of this sell order that's a couple days old, you have almost no supply. So basically the Tengu hasn't moved in the last week or so. This is a crazy situation. First signs for supply in the destroyers. That's something to keep in mind. But this Legion chart, this Loki chart with these volumes, let's take a quick look if it's perhaps the trade tower or something like. Nope, it's definitely not. This for me is potentially your trade of the week. Tech 3 cruisers dropping off a cliff, 1-year low points, and we're not seeing hundreds of them on the market. Kind of crazy, definitely a possibility. If you want to fly Tech 3 ships, it's your time to grab some really cheap hulls. Damn. And finally, after the Tech 3s, we are going for the extra product request this week. I already have one for next week as well, but feel free to post any that you have. It's going to be for faction drones coming in at 41.5. Alright, so we've got drones, combat drones, and let's start with the light ones, and then the idea was to go for faction and storyline. So here are augmented acolytes, alright, down to a 1-year low point, going for around 10 million ISK. Here was the augmented hobgoblins, also around 10 million, pretty cheap I would say actually, and also a 1-year low point. The augmented hornets went to 10 million, a little bit of a bounce on that, 12 million actually for the sellers, but 8 million for the buyers, pretty cheap as well. And then the augmented warriors actually doing the worst. When you look at this entire chart, 20 million at the start, 10 million now, that's 50% loss from the start price, and yeah, 1-year low point yet again. We're quickly gonna go over the rest of these, but Kaldari Navy Hornet also pretty cheap. Federation Navy Hobgoblin actually going up, and I think that here we could have another faction warfare related item, right? Federation Navy, it's going to be LP. Kaldari Navy also going to be LP. You can see this swing again. Cheap LPs, Kaldari are doing well. As a result, the price for Galente drones is up because their LP becomes more expensive. Also, one that you could take a look at for faction warfare information here is Imperial Navy Acolyte, starts at 2.5 million, now going for half the price almost. So sharp decline, nice for Amar, and so we would expect the Republic Fleet Warrior then to shoot up in price, which it does from 1 million to 1.5. It's still a bit muted, but so that's another part of these faction warfare drones as well. And then we get the integrated that are, well, around average. Integrated Hobgoblin at a low point, integrated Hornet 1-year low point, quite a drop off at the end there. Integrated Warriors are on the average, but they're pretty cheap, so they're probably not gonna be the focus. All right, let's move on to the mediums, then take a quick look at these factions as well. I think we'll just do augmented, and then we'll take a quick look at the faction warfare related ones. So augmented hammerheads, 1-year low point again, starts at 40 to 50 million, currently selling for 23 million, 20 million for the buyers. So that has obviously declined quite a bit. Augmented infiltrators going for around 30 million, a bit more expensive, but look at where we start, 50 to 60. Valkyries, 1-year low point. Vespas, also at the low end, obviously, not as pronounced as, let's say, the hammerhead drop off. And then Kaldari Navy Vespa, really cheap. So Federation Navy Hammerhead up in price. Imperial Navy Infiltrator, that sharp drop off again. And then Republic Fleet Valkyrie up in price a little bit. You can probably expect that to continue. I think if you compare that to the Imperial Navy drop off here, we basically still have that second leg down, which here will still mean a second leg up, normally speaking. So yeah, that pattern is definitely confirming itself. Let's take a look at the heavies then, go for faction, and take a look again at the augmenteds. Here it's a bit less pronounced, right? Start at 50, ends at 37.5, but obviously trading below average. God damn it. Galente ones, I would say, because they're highest damage, they tend to be the most popular ones. So this is why the Ogre starts at 80 million and it ends at a 1-year low point of 40 million ISK. Augmented Praetor is also obviously trading at a low point, and then the Augmented Wasp, same thing, 1-year low point. And then for Kaldari, again, LP super cheap, volumes are up, prices are down, so Kaldari Faction Warfare is doing quite well. Federation Navy Ogre, well, you get the opposite effect, of course. Their LP is more expensive, so these go from 2 to 3 million ISK. Imperial Navy Praetor, we've got the drop off, so their LP has become super cheap all of a sudden, from 5 million almost to 2 million. And then the Republic Fleet Berserk is moving up. I think we have a second move up to go, considering the drop off here in the Imperial Navy Praetors. Very interesting situation, not something that I had thought about, but just like what I often do with faction frigates, faction cruisers, you have another category of items, this time the faction drones, that can potentially lead to predictable trades with profits. Right now, Imperial Navy Praetor, you can buy them for 2 million. You know that when Minmatar, or if Minmatar Faction Warfare starts to make a comeback, that's going to be the time to start to sell them, because then that LP cost goes up, and so do these prices. So very interesting suggestion. And the augmenteds, well, they're really good drones, and they're actually just becoming more and more affordable, with most of those trading at 1-year low points. Awesome suggestion, thank you very much for that. And for next week I have planned drone capillary fruits. You know what, I'm just gonna include it on this one as well, because it was a request anyways, and it's drone related. So it was, I think, drone capillary fluids or something like that. Yep, which also dropped off to a 1-year low point, going for 250,000 ISK. 260 for the sellers, 253 for the buyers. Starts at 750 most of the year, so this is definitely about a third of the price it was, let's say, around in December. That's a sharp drop off, and is probably part of the explanation why these faction warfare drones are, well, not faction warfare, but why these, let's go for this one for instance, are dropping off as well. Industry. Yep, there you go. That's because you need these rogue drone items, and apparently a lot of these, if we take a quick look at this one, are also trading at 1-year low point. So there you go, guys. It's drone stuff as the extra product this week. Very interesting suggestion, actually, and love it. Definitely pretty good. So if you have anything for next week, feel free to put that in the comments. But that's gonna be it for this EVE Talk, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.